right, we are at 6:02. I'm going to go ahead. I think I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'm sure a lot of folks will filter in through the course of the evening, but first off, welcome to the 2025 VMBA virtual annual meeting. Thanks everyone for joining. We've got an action-packed evening talking about what happened in 2024. We hear from a bunch of chapters about trail projects, really cool things that happened out in the woods, and then we'll jump in and talk a little bit about what's ahead for 2025. So again, thanks for joining. We are recording, just so folks know. If you do have, I'll go through housekeeping here now. If you have questions, so that's on the right-hand panel here, please enter them into the Q&A box. We'll be kind of keeping an eye on those throughout the evening. If it makes sense to answer them as we go along, we'll go ahead and do that. We've also bucketed some time at the end to answer questions if it makes sense. If for any reason we get questions that we don't get to during the course of the evening tonight, we'll make sure we follow up and share those in the blog post that will cover this meeting. So please do put those questions in the Q&A if you do have them. So just run through the agenda for tonight. First, we'll go over 2024. There'll be a bit of me talking on the front end, the first half hour, but I promise you that's it. But going over kind of the year that was, some highlights. I'll then, and we'll actually have a few other folks from the VMBA office talk as well. We'll then hand it over to our treasurer, Curtis Fox, to talk about the annual financials from 2024. We'll then pivot and talk about grants and grant projects, both grants that we awarded in 2024, and then my favorite part of the evening, we'll spend a good chunk of time hearing from chapters about completed trail and naming grants. We have a whole bunch. It's really neat to hear about the work that got accomplished last year. So that's kind of the middle of this the sandwich for this evening. Then we'll turn and talk about board results, a little bit of looking ahead for the year that you're coming up. We'll announce our ambassadors. We'll tease the bike raffle that's about to launch, talk about events for the season. And then, as I mentioned before, lead into a little bit of just Q&A if there are questions that we didn't get a chance to get to. So again, a full evening, and we really appreciate everyone who can attend. And we will be, as I mentioned, we are recording this, and we'll be sharing that link as well for folks that didn't get to attend live. So first off, just to start us off with the vision and mission of the organization, these were revised as part of our strategic planning process in 2023. But really, at VMBA, our vision is for mountain biking to be at the center of healthy, economically vibrant, and environmentally sustainable communities throughout Vermont, with well-planned, accessible, and progressive trail systems statewide. So that vision is really what we're all kind of rowing towards, or pedaling towards, I guess is a better analogy. And the mission, the way that we pursue that vision, is to ensure the sustainability of mountain biking in Vermont and thoughtfully promote exceptional riding experiences for all through advocacy, education, and community-driven stewardship. So again, that's what anchors our work, and just always, particularly in this annual meeting, kind of worth taking a moment just to reflect on that mission and vision. In terms of who we are, what VMBA is and does and how we work, really VMBA is comprised of two really kind of hub and spoke model of the central office, which the team here that is presenting tonight that is responsible for advocacy, education, running our membership platform, supporting our chapters, things like insurance on the back end, and driving a lot of grants and fundraising efforts as well. And then the chapters that really are the tip of the spear of that community-driven stewardship. So 28 local chapters, all pictured here. On the right, we'll get to hear from many of them tonight, which is awesome. But the chapters are really responsible for trail stewardship, community engagement, programming like youth programming, engaging with landowners, driving volunteering, and running a lot of events at the ground level. So VMBA as an organization, really the symbiotic or the combination of chapters at the local level, office at the central level. So that's who we are. Before we get too much deeper, I did want to take a moment for a land acknowledgement, which the VMBA, our DEI committee, spent some time and has revised this over the years. But last year we spent a lot of time thinking and spending some time with this statement. And just to our work and understand that the lands that VMBA chapters currently help steward and on which we have the privilege to ride were the original homeland of Native tribes until they were forced to cede control through Euro-American governance. We recognize these tribes, the land, and its stories as many organizations and governments have done, and express our gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory and homelands we occupy. So I just want to take a moment, acknowledge again all the original inhabitants of this land. They are really the original stewards, and our model really should follow after them in terms of caring for while we use the land as well. So to talk for a moment, just kind of high level about the numbers from 2024. At the end of the year, we wrapped up with stewarding just around 930 miles of public access single track in Vermont. That's close to 90% of all the publicly accessible mountain bike trails in the state. To do that, our chapters utilized over 26,000 volunteer hours to take care of those trails. We wrapped up the year just over 9,300 members. And we'll talk a little bit later. That's actually a dip from the year previously, which is an important thing for us to talk about. 28 chapters, as I noted. We added 24 miles of trails across the state. We also sunsetted a fair amount of trails, while also kind of a net gain, but certainly not 24 in total. And then another thing just to touch on is our chapters reported over 150 miles of major upgrades and repairs. So this is a trail system that requires a lot of care and work to keep up. So it's something that, as much as we invest in new trail and adding trail mileage, we definitely have spent a lot of time taking care of through deferred or maintenance, again, upgrades and repairs, significant work on those existing trails. As we talk about the progress over the past year, it's certainly worth reflecting on our 5-year strategic plan. So the board, back in 2023, started a process to develop a new 5-year strategic plan, which we talked about a lot last year. 2020, during the course of 2023, we launched that plan. So 2024, we were certainly following through with executing toward the goals of that plan. But it's super important because through that effort, we laid out these 7 major goals, which we call the TACO, which stands for Trails, Advocacy, Community, and the Organization. And those goals are just one, for trails to steward a statewide network of accessible, well-planned, progressive, and sustainable trails. So all of our trails work moves towards that objective. Advocacy, we have 2 goals. One is to move public access recreational trails out of Act 250 and into an appropriate oversight model. So that's related to regulation. And the second is to acknowledge landowners by incorporating public access trails into the current use program or a program like current use, basically some way to give recognition to the 70+% of public access trails that are on private land. On the community front, we've got 3 goals. One is to establish an informed ridership that knows when, where, and how to ride. The second is to count the majority of those who regularly use our trails as VMBA members. And then the third is to significantly increase youth, non-male, BIPOC, and adaptive representation in mountain bike ridership. And the last bucket is the organization. That's to run a thriving, sustainable organization that attracts and retains talent and develops our chapters. So collectively, that's the goals of our strategic plan. And it's something that we keep in mind as we follow. So reflecting on what does that look like for 2024, we had a plan to follow. Well, one of the things we did early in 2024, we actually had a retreat, or the board got together and the staff and worked through what these essentially theories of change models for each of those 4 major categories. So really the strategic plan did a lot of work in laying out the what in terms of goals, milestones, partners, things like that. And this year we spent a lot of thinking about the how, literally what are the dominoes that would need to fall, or what are the pieces that we need to have in place. So that was a really productive start to the year, that 2024. And as we'll talk about the year ahead, part of a strategic plan is the longer you go, the harder it is to stick to the plan you laid out. But it's really important to revisit based on those goals and try to understand how you're going to then refine, or how we're going to refine our approach. So really, I think kind of an exemplary or a good example of how the board functions and help guides the way this organization works. So to talk a little bit about progress, we did a lot across these categories. So bucketing it into those, again, those 4, the trails, advocacy, community, and the organization. Starting with trails. So the first thing that's worth noting, and this is something that we called out as a milestone in our plan, we completed a development of this best management practices for trail construction and maintenance in the Northeast. So this was a year-long effort. Well, I'll talk a bit about it a fair bit more in an upcoming slide because it's a highlight from the year, but getting that year-long effort completed and producing this really first of its kind document to guide our efforts and help us achieve that overall goal of our trails aim within the strategic plan was really an important accomplishment. We also, as I noted, completed as an organization 24 new miles of sustainable, well-planned, accessible trails. So that was, again, that's the core of our organization, where trail stewardship and the construction of those new high-quality trail miles was certainly a highlight. I mentioned already as well, those upgrades to 150+ miles of trail, also certainly worth noting. And then a couple of other highlights, and again, we'll talk a lot. A lot of the highlights will be evident in the chapter's reporting, but we delivered over $60,000 in storm recovery funds, both internal funds and public funds through the VOREC community grant program. So those funds help restore chapters from storm damage sustained in 2023 and 2024. And then a highlight as well that you won't hear tonight, but I thought it was really just a cool project worth calling out. We completed a project down in the Musalamu National Recreation Area to finish the Silver Moose Trail. This is driven by our Addison County Bike Club chapter. Essentially this major project funded through our challenge partnership agreement with the U.S. Forest Service, who have been tremendous partners over the past decade in helping us grow mountain bike access in the Green Mountain National Forest. And it's an amazing project. Involved a major bridge to cross a stream in a wetland area there, but one of the largest grants that we've managed as an organization, and personally an experience I'm really looking forward to riding next year in terms of it's going to really connect two areas down there in the Musalamu. So just a neat project to have accomplished, and a nice kind of feather in our cap. On the advocacy front, we continued to lead the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. So the VTGC is the collection of trail stewardship organizations in Vermont that encompass whether it's mountain biking, cross-country skiing. You've got Green Mountain Club, you've got Catamount Trail Association, Vermont Huts, the Vermont Association of Snow Travelers, VAST, ATVers. It's 30 plus organizations that are all the private nonprofits that do the vast majority of trail stewardship. VMBA is the chair of that organization, and we invest a lot of time in trying to move collectively as a community to align on goals and then achieve those goals. So a lot of our work this past year. We also have been part of a process run by the Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation to modernize what's known as the Vermont Trail System. The Vermont Trail System is the official program that public access trails in Vermont are recognized. So it's essentially, if you have a trail, if you're part of the Vermont Trail System, it means that you've gone through the official channels, that your trail's open to the public. And there are important benefits that provides, including things like access to the municipal threshold for Act 250 permits. So a lot of all of our trail, or VMBA as an organization, is an organizational member of the Vermont Trail System. The modernization of that process, and this is if you kind of go deeper into the strategic plan, but that's really a bedrock piece of our strategic plan over the next couple of years. A modernized Vermont Trail System is a keystone to things like getting trails into some kind of a current use like program and getting potentially a long-term exemption or alternative to Act 250. Without a modernized Vermont Trail System, none of that stuff is possible. We need something that officially designates trails as high quality, low impact, those kind of things. So to actually get this process underway this past year is really exciting. It's going to help. That's literally the first step towards achieving those advocacy outcomes. So super exciting. We also are in the process now. We have two bills, essentially paired bills. They're the same language, but in the House, that would fund or would establish a commission to study recreation access recognition. So this would be the first step in creating a program. I mentioned something like current use that would be able to acknowledge landowners who host recreation as an alternative to developing their property. So there are actual, we worked closely to author those bills in the fall. It's unlikely we'll see them pass in this first year of the biennium, but we're thinking towards the next year and are putting a lot of energy knowing that establishing that commission and the study that would come out of it is really, that's how the process works in terms of actually being able to get this program in place. So super exciting to have a piece of legislation that is tied directly to one of those 7 goals in our strategic plan. We had another super successful outdoor recreation day at the State House. Over 100 recreation advocates gathered, many VMBA chapter leaders, and then folks across the Trails and Greenways Council were at the State House we testified in close to a half dozen committees and spent a whole day engaging with legislators about the issues that are important to recreation. So really raising the spotlight and profile of recreation as an economic and a public health driver in the state. And then we worked closely as well. Folks may be familiar with the 30 by 30 process that's going on in Vermont. It's led by part of a bill that's called Act 59. It's essentially the process that will establish a plan for conserving 30% of Vermont's landscape by 2030. We've been working really hard to ensure recreation is really adequately utilized and integral to that plan. Not that every conserved acre is going to have a trail, but knowing that trails are really the means through which the public, in many ways, accesses those public and conserved lands. So, working closely and as the plan itself is supposed to be published at the end of this year, it might take a little longer than that. But we're at least currently pretty content or happy to see the direction it's going and expect to see recreation play an important role in that long-term conservation plan, which the great thing for us as trail users is that is going to mean more high quality access and miles to public lands, which is really exciting. On the community front, we continue to drive forward our adaptive assessment program, which is really kind of a leader in the country and exciting to be a part of. As I talk later, we're going to be presenting at the International Trails Summit about that work, but it's actually led as well to a major grant. We'll also talk about the Trail Accessibility Hub. This is a grant that's led by the Trails and Greenways Council, but VMBA is one of the founding partners. It's the largest ever VOREC community grant that's been awarded, and it's designed essentially to fund both assessment work and then the creation of a centralized hub to support trail organizations as they look to make their trail systems more accessible. And the cool thing about the hub is it's not just mountain bike trails and mountain bike assessments, it's water trails and pedestrian trails as too. So really neat to see our work kind of help evolve into this much broader, bigger program. Move Forward Together Vermont launched this past year. We were quite integral in the development of that program. This is the sort of collective plan for outdoor recreation in Vermont. And underneath that plan, stewardship is one of the three major pillars in the Move Forward Together Vermont plan, which is really published by the state. It's designed to really guide grant making and policy making over the next couple of years. And investing and upgrading existing recreation infrastructure is the number one priority action underneath that plan. So really seeing recreational trails and the infrastructure we maintain is kind of front and center in that plan, which is great. On the community front, we also ran Learn to Bike programming again, which is helping to introduce new folks to the sport, which is excellent and exciting. I'll talk about another program in a minute here this thing called the Visitor's Guide to Mountain Biking in Vermont, which is a really cool project that we launched through some grant funding that'll help attract and ideally recruit new members, folks from outside the state that are visiting and encouraging them to become VMBA members. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but a big effort to grow that membership base. The Elevate Mountain Bike Festival had a successful second year at East Burke. We're back for a third year. We'll talk about that, about exciting things to come, but a really neat, the only real event in the Northeast for women and gender expansive mountain bikers to get together and grow that community. So super exciting. And then we leaned in heavily to the Ride with Gratitude campaign, which is helping create a collective model for responsible trail use in the region. And lastly, on the organization front, sorry, folks, we expanded the chapter resource library, continue to grow that and try to make that a more powerful resource for chapters. We now also have a formal memorandum of understanding with Vermont Huts for the Velomont project. So we will talk more about the Velomont in a minute, but we restructured how we're working together on that project and are really excited about how it's going to allow us to make even more progress and faster progress moving forward. We created an organizational how-to manual for VMBA, which sounds extremely boring, but is extremely important too. It's essentially the how-to guide if you ever needed to reboot VMBA. It was one of our goals for last year, and we were able to accomplish it this past year. The Advisory Council, which is the collection of our chapters throughout the state that join quarterly to advise the office on topics and questions and discussion items, and also help guide our trail grant program. That continues to grow and strengthen, which is exciting. And then really importantly, we directed over $90,000 in grant funding to our chapters. So that we'll talk a lot about those grants up ahead, but also just something we continue to try to grow as an organization to put more dollars into the hands of our chapters. So a couple of highlights, just wanted to touch, dig in a little bit on a few topics. One is the accessibility and access. I mentioned the trail assessments that's been doing for the past couple of years now. Last year, we performed 8 of those across the state. We do this in close collaboration with Vermont Adaptive and the Kelly Brush Foundation. We awarded directly through those trail assessments. We're fortunate to have grant support through the Kelly Brush Foundation and directly award these assessment upgrade grants to chapters. So we identify issues on site, chapters can immediately apply for funding and then upgrade the trails with that funding. So we'll talk about those projects specifically in a few minutes. We now have over 100 miles of mountain bike trails in Vermont that are adaptive friendly, which is close to 10% of our public accessible trails. So we're exciting to see that number grow. And then we launched this past year a map on the website that actually highlights the trail systems in Vermont that are adaptive friendly that folks can visit to encourage that adaptive visitation. And we're presenting, as I mentioned before, our proposal was accepted to present this work at the International Trail Summit next month, and a really good chance to both share what we're up to and get feedback and understand what's going on elsewhere in the country. But from everything we've talked to, Vermont appears to be really a leader in this space and exciting, and it's really cool work to be doing. As I mentioned briefly, but kind of touch on it more in more detail. And after the fact, when we publish, you can actually click on the video here. But we helped launch this thing called the Trail Accessibility Hub. So this is a grant that is led by the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. VMBA is one of the founding partners of this project. But it's a consortium of 6 organizations across mountain bike, water, and pedestrian trail use. And the purpose of this hub is to be able to, one, conduct assessments and fund assessments for trail organizations to understand, where and how to either modify or build new trails that are accessible, and then also to create this centralized resource that organizations can go to for advice, design, borrowing equipment, things like that, to actually help execute those projects. So it's super exciting. It's the largest ever VORAC community grant. We held our first, as part of the project, we held a Trail Accessibility Summit in January. We had over 60 advocates across not just trail stewardship, but also the disabilities community. And it was amazing to see those folks get together. This was up at Bolton Valley, and really align on how we can collectively move forward this landscape in Vermont that's more accessible for folks to get outside. So really exciting, and something you'll see grow over the next year. So we launched this in the middle of last year. And again, if you're interested, I would encourage you to check out one of the videos that we put together for the project, which you can take a look at afterwards. I'm not gonna play it now, but it is a good one. Another highlight I touched on briefly, but did want to take a minute to expand on, is the publishing of these best management practices. Again, this is available in the chapter resource library section of our website. But this is really driven by the lack of a clear, concise, effectively punch list of what are the best management practices for mountain bike construction and maintenance. There are, as folks may be familiar with, things like the IMBA books. Those are great how-to guides, but they don't really distill it down to practices that are more like a punch list, or things you could include in a contract with a builder, for example. And the rationale for this is fourfold, really. The reason we pursued this project. One is to provide more guidance and clarity for our chapters about kind of the standard for trail construction. The second is for builder accountability. We're baking these BMPs into contracts so we can hold folks accountable to adhere to these standards. The third is as an advocacy tool. So when we communicate with stakeholders or policymakers, to be able to very clearly illustrate the high standard to which we are constructing and maintaining mountain bike trails. This is a pretty vital piece. It's also something we believe will inform, as I mentioned before, the modernization of the Vermont trail system, which will link to best management practices that we believe will look quite similar to those that we've developed through this project the past year. And the last is to actually facilitate, we're developing tools for trail assessment. So what we'd love to see is to have these best management practices flow down to folks who, when they're out in the woods, can really, with the assessment eye, look at the trails we have. We have a ton of legacy trails in Vermont. It's not everything can reach these. These are aspirational in terms of best management practices we'd ideally reach, but certainly historical trails aren't going to be there. But to identify where we're falling short, because that's the best way as an organization to make those improvements and to reach that higher standard. So a lot of rationale, and the end products we've got, this is really based in a huge literature review of existing management practices. So not coming up with anything new. This was working over 40, 50 years of trail building science and art to pull together across 40 different sources. What we ended up with was 22 distinct categories of best management practices, 160 unique BMPs across those categories, and additional tools kind of surrounding that. So we have an assessment tool for when you go out on the trail, kind of what to help sort of catalog those, whether or not trails are either built or maintained to these practices, and then also a template to build into builders' contracts to, as I mentioned before, ensure that if construction takes place and things are not met, there's a standard or a way that you can go back and say, well, I need you to go back and fix or meet that standard. So a lot of work went into this. Really exciting. We'll be doing a lot more rollout over the past couple of months because we've had a lot of things going on, but it's exciting to have gotten this one completed. And I think this is the last highlight. Just wanted to talk about the visitor's guide. This is on the marketing front, so a very different angle, but we were fortunate enough to receive funding through an EDA grant for its transformational travel, the grant program, the T-term grant program that the Department of Tourism runs. We were fortunate to receive one of these transformational tourism and regional marketing grants, and which funded significant amount of work to engage an external marketing agency to essentially develop these visitor guides for Vermont. And one thing that we had noticed throughout the years, lots of people come to ride mountain bikes in Vermont, often with little direction. Sometimes they explore on their own. Sometimes they end up in places that aren't particularly well suited for the lots of visitors or particularly visitors that don't have knowledge. So we view this as an opportunity to do a couple of things. One is to really direct folks to areas that were best suited to handle that traffic. So we looked at regions across the state and identified those hubs that were really best suited to receive visitors in that traffic, and then come up with guides for when folks come in and visit, the rides that they could do, sort of itineraries in terms of how to best experience that space. I personally know when I've been out in the woods and found people riding loops in the wrong direction and clearly not having as good of a time as they could have because they were headed, riding up the downhill or vice versa. So this really creates itineraries about where people not just should ride, but where they can stay and eat in these different areas. And it's linked through the VMBA website. It's live now underneath our ride top nav. And we just published it this past week. But the goal is to really direct folks into places they should be. The other things that allows us to do, though, one is to really get eyes in front of folks visiting the state. So one thing we'd love to do is convert as many of those visitors into members and members of our chapters. So this gets VMBA into their eyes that they're looking at throughout the guide. It really promotes VMBA membership. It identifies all the VMBA member benefits that are available in the different areas. So all the partners over the 200 plus partners we work with are highlighted throughout the guide. And again, it's join because you'll be able to access those benefits. And lastly, it gives us an opportunity to highlight partners and really provide a benefit and value to the businesses we work with. So we want those businesses to support us and support our chapters. This provides a direct visual benefit to them, and ideally is going to drive visitation to the businesses that support mountain biking and trails. So if you have folks visiting the state, I think this is an amazing guide, as I kind of love to travel throughout the state. It's not purely for folks living outside Vermont, but we're excited for this as a tool that'll help convert those folks into members, those visitors. Yeah, and then the last piece here is that this actually doesn't just fund the guides, but we have funding to do press tours. So we're going to be the marketing firm that is contracted through this grant will be actually bringing in press to come and sort of experience these guides and again promote these areas that are ready for visitation well outside our region. So in the kind of major metro areas around and nationwide really, and also activate influencers to help kind of promote these guides. So there's a lot of kind of on the ground promotion that'll help. We're hoping drive really success through this program as well. So exciting to launch that this year. And I mentioned the Velemont before. This, as folks are probably familiar with, the Velemont is the intent for this tip to tail 485-mile trail system that'll run the length of Vermont. We not only sort of reestablished a much closer partnership with Vermont Huts this past year as the really two major organizations driving this effort, but some really cool things took place or happened to move the overall project forward. So the first is the Velemont Vision Plan, which is available online, a year-long effort funded through a VORAC grant to really lay out the plan for what is the vision for the Velemont, and was based on a ton of partner engagement and a ton of community engagement. So there were open houses throughout the state. A lot of work went into identifying sort of prospective trail corridor on one level. So there's 13 detailed sectors in the plan that really lay out where the trail will go or should go. But also a lot of it was based on community feedback in terms of what communities wanted and didn't want, where there were the biggest opportunities and areas that we should avoid. So ton of work went into that. It's now for the project really the guiding light in terms of as we think about the trail corridor moving forward. This is a project that's going to take many years to complete. There's a lot of progress that's already happened, but that was a huge lift over the past year, and really need to see that project take place. Another piece, though, it's in the Velemont's not just for the future. There is now the Heart of the Greens loop. So it's a 38-mile loop that includes a huge portion of the sort of linear Velemont trail, as well as trail that you can do to essentially create this overnight loop. It's a 1 or 2 night experience you can do down there in the kind of Rochester area. And it's sort of the first, it's the way that we're trying to roll out the Velemont so that folks can experience it rather than just, at some point in the future, it'll become a point-to-point opportunity. And actually the studies that we've done as part of this, or that have been commissioned for the Velemont and looking at other of these sort of similar long distance trails, is that most people experience it in these 1, 2, or 3 day kind of journeys. So really neat opportunity to start promoting and using the Velemont in its intended form. And then stuff coming down the road on the pike on the Velemont, just because this is kind of some of it's happening now, but there's some of it for the future, that we've got a lot of miles on federal land that are really set to be developed or in the process of being sort of planned and flagged at the moment. So there's the area in the Rochester district, so the Telephone Gap Integrated Resource Plan. We're waiting for final decision on that, but that's really the nearest term where we're expecting construction to take place very soon. We've got builders lined up and have really the corridor fly to many places. And so that's where we'll see the nearest term sort of development connecting down towards from Pittsfield to Mendon. And then there was folks who have seen public comment public comment was open on a project in Manchester that created 75 miles of Velomont trail. A lot of it was actually improvement or recruitment of existing trail, but there was some new trail construction as well that's going to create a really extended segment down there near the Massachusetts border. So over the next a couple of years, we'll see well over 100 miles of Velomont trail established in those federal lands in the Rochester and Manchester districts. So super exciting. And then a lot of work now thinking the next phase. So we're working a lot in public land right now, but we're beginning to look at where private land opportunities exist. So really exciting. Last thing I'll highlight here is just some wanted to share what we heard from our chapters over the past year. So we run a survey every year. Again, the chapters are vital and a core element of this organization. I already touched on the statistics, but one of the big highlights that they promoted was 19 major trail projects across the state, which and to kind of, I won't read through them all because I had queued them up, but you'll hear about a lot of them here. But really projects that either brand new trail systems or major bridges, or really just highlighting the sort of the volume of work and the quality of work going on. We applied to 28 unique grant programs and received awards from 20 of them. So it's a pretty impressive success rate, and the chapters are really doing impressive fundraising work. As I mentioned, 26,000 volunteer hours. The majority of that is field work, but a lot of it is administrative work. So our chapter boards and are putting a ton of hours and time into that core administrative effort to keep this organization going. There were common challenges cited. Membership, as we'll talk about in a minute, was certainly an issue. Capacity of the organizations, some with no staff or limited staff, is really tough. And then volunteers can only be pushed so far. So one of the things we're really thinking about over the next couple of years is how we can increasingly professionalize and fund more staff capacity in our chapters. Call for support was pretty mixed, everything from Act 250 to growing membership, inter-chapter communications. So no one clear thing, but clearly evident of more that the VMBA office can do to help support chapters. And now some more sort of fun trail facts is that we're now up to 34 networks across the state that are officially open to Class 1 pedal assist electric mountain bikes, and 21 networks managed for winter fat biking. So those are both growing quite significantly across the state. And last thing worth highlighting was that a huge number of our chapters are now running youth programming, which is really exciting. That's one of the core populations we want to grow over the next couple of years as laid out in our strategic plan. About a third are now running youth programming, and another third are interested in doing so. So we expect that to grow even more over the next couple of years, but really neat way to get new riders into the sport and continue to grow community here. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Amy to talk a little bit about membership.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Potter. I'm VMBA's operations manager, and I am here to share a quick overview of our 2024 membership data. And I apologize if you hear a screaming child in the background. There's no quieting my 2-year-old. So this past year, we saw a 5% overall decline in membership. This is the first drop in more than 5 years. So while the individual in U25, so under age of 25 memberships, remained steady, the biggest shift was in our family memberships, which declined by about 8%. But on the positive side, 78% of our 2023 members renewed in 2024. So that's a pretty good retention rate. And then another cool trend was that our Canadian membership grew by about 50%. It's still a pretty low number with about 350-ish members, but it will be interesting to see if that growth continues and how it goes with Canadian visitors this year for our membership. But we do have some new exciting benefits that Joe worked really hard on, and he'll go over some cool, fun early season events later in this presentation. So hopefully we can have some more enticing benefits and events to get those numbers back up. But I am going to hand it over to Curtis to chat about financials. Thanks.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I am attempting to come off of camera and it is not working, but my voice is all that you need. Anyway. Hey folks, I am, I think, can you jump ahead maybe the slide? There we go. Awesome. Hey guys, I'm Curtis. I'm a board member and also the treasurer of VMBA. I'm in my second term right now, so fourth year. Just one back. Oh, there we go. In my second year as treasurer. I live in Waterbury with my wife and a couple of kids, and ride trails primarily in the area. So I'm going to take you through over the next 10 minutes, really looking at VMBA's 2024 income, expenses, and fundraising. So this slide here is kind of building off the slide that Amy had just presented on, looking at our overall membership revenue, which, as we just acknowledged, is down about 4% versus where we sat at the end of 2023. But if you look at really the distribution of primary and add-on revenue, it's identical. So we have, even though we're down a little bit overall, we have maintained exactly what we are giving back to the chapters and what we are allocating otherwise back to office support, which I'll get into detail about. So yeah, overall, most important thing to kind of acknowledge here, 89% of membership income is allocated to supporting chapters. Of that, we bucket those into a couple of different categories. Direct, which is really the bulk of membership income, goes right back to chapters. That's the splits that come through those membership signups. Indirect, at 31% overall, is a slew of other things, and there's some sexy stuff in here like trail grants and event assistance, and some not so sexy stuff like insurance and stuffing thousands of membership packets. But it all encompasses efforts that are, at the end of the day, arranged to support chapters and what you do on the ground. I think that's it for this slide. I'll jump to the next one if you could, Nick. Cool. All right, so this is zooming out a little bit further at the larger financial picture. So if you start kind of on the left with revenue, we just looked at membership income, and here you can see that income really accounts for about half, or 42% of our overall revenue. The first and immediate walk away here and just looking at this slide is that, we had positive net income in 2024, and that's obviously what one hopes for. If we start on the left on the revenue side, just breaking down a little bit of that membership income category, some of that is add-on, some of that is individuals and families. But we pass, as we just acknowledged in the last slide, as much of that directly back to chapters as possible. In the fundraising category at 11%, really you're looking at there the annual fund, raffles, general donations that come in over the course of the year. Just to the left at 23%, chapter donations. That's kind of a couple of different things, but really the summary of that is that 100% of all of what is in that bucket goes back to chapters, and that's kind of a couple different things. It's grants, which are chapter designated grants that come through VMBA that we just hold and pass right back to chapters, and it also encompasses donations, which we touched on already a little bit, or Nick touched on earlier, but are up significantly this year, largely thanks to the Forest Service grant for the Moosomaloo project down in Addison, and really that makes up the bulk of that bucket. Naming grants are also allocated in chapter donations and grants category. Jumping right up above that, office grants at 19%. There's a couple different pieces here again as well. The biggest of which is, really thanks to our annual supporters, our two perennial supporters, the Lintelak Foundation and the Conine Family Foundation, which we cannot thank enough, because they've been dedicated to VMBA for years, and their ongoing support is a huge piece of what we account for. Within that office grants category as well, there's some what we call restricted grants or one-time grants, things like the Kelly Brush Foundation grant that Nick had mentioned, the VORAC flood recovery grant, the T-term grant for those visitor guides, all of which we touched on just a second ago, and we'll get into greater detail on. Sponsorship, sponsorship as an overall percentage of what we've done has remained similar, but overall investment in sponsorship, because we've gone up in income this year, has actually ballooned quite a bit, and a lot of that is thanks to the hard work of Joe Gaynor in the office that you'll hear more from in a little bit. But sponsorship is really our corporate sponsors for the most part. Our partners, which give anything from 2.5 grand up to 15 grand each, for projects throughout the year. Also within that, Downhill Mountains and that partnership program as well. If we jump over to the other side, the cost side on the right. Yeah, same slide. Thank you. Really, the 24% direct and indirect, that's what we looked at on that previous slide. That's that 89% of membership income. The 28% of chapter donations and grants, just to kind of reiterate how we take one from one end and give it to the other. That's chapters. That's what you see in chapter donations and grants on the left side, as well as the VORAC grants I mentioned. Office operations, this is 32, represented at 32% here. That's everything really it takes to run the central office. And I have to acknowledge Nick and the team as an overall percentage of spend. We are down a couple percentage points based on our costs from 2023. So that's only truly thanks to some double time efforts by the staff and some really conscious cost saving efforts that everyone's taken responsibility for. So that's a great trend to see. Marketing 2%, not much to say there other than that's promotions, photography, videography, everything that it takes to promote the organization and our members and chapters. So between these two numbers, net income, we ended 2024 positive $13,500, and really it's actually that number is probably closer to $4,500 because already a portion of what we carried into 24 has allocations for some adaptive programs and major storm recovery efforts that are dedicated to specific projects. So we ended almost entirely flush for the year, which is a huge credit to the management of the staff for bringing us in at exactly where we anticipated. Next slide, please. Awesome. So now we're looking at fundraising. Essentially what we're looking at here is fundraising plus grants. This is again building on sort of what we talked about in the last slide. Overall fundraising income, so everything represented here is actually up $40,000 based on where we ended 2023. That's not an entirely it's not an entirely equal playing field. However, the raffle income and general donations are down. Raffle income was down 24%. General donations, which are the donations that come in ad hoc over the course of the year, are down about 32%. Where we made up ground was in our annual fund campaign, which was up 11%. In our operating grants, which includes that T-term grant and the VORAC grant we've now mentioned a few times. So overall strong. We brought in some grant money and that certainly saved the day. And then I think our annual fund continues to find new heights. And within that, I'd like to acknowledge the board, my colleagues, specifically, Quinn, who served as president for the last several years, for stepping up overall involvement, supporting the annual campaign. It continues to be, a very important driver of what keeps the engine on. And the board has just found new ways each and every year to get involved with major donors, with hosting events, with doing what we can. It's really the number one way we see ourselves as adding additional value to Nick and the staff. So kudos to those of you on the board who've made extra efforts there. And the only other thing I'll say about all of this is, there's a bit of a project going on right now within the board to analyze really these sources of revenue and fundraising, and try to break up some of the messaging over the course of the year to look at what's successful and what hasn't been successful, and do kind of a really significant deep dive into exploring other ways of generating fundraising for the office and for chapters. We've been very lucky to pick up some folks on the board with great fundraising experience recently. So I think that there's a lot of things to come in this slide in the future. That is it for me. I think I'm next handing off to Joe, who's potentially going to talk about naming grants.
Yeah, everyone. I'm Joe Gain. I'm the Programs and Partnerships Manager for VMBA. So I'm talking about grants that we just received and will be going into action this year. So our 2025 naming grants. We were able to work with 6 businesses that we have worked with in the past and some new ones with a total of $23,500. The first one is with Press Forward, who we actually have a very deep connection with this year. They're helping us with that travel guide or visitor's guide. They are going to be helping produce a blue progression trail, kind of like a bike park jump thing that's going to be built on Tom Pesker's land. He's also building it. So Island Mountain Bike Lodge or Island Mountain Bike Park. So that should be some really awesome jumps in a really awesome area that is growing. And then we have Shram, who was pretty interested in the kind of Belmont project and e-bikes. So basically, they were looking to have a place that had both of those things and was going to be in the path of the Belmont project. So the driving range was a logical step for that, being our newest one. So they're going to help with a new climbing trail, which will be pretty fun to kind of connect the upper section stuff. So keep an eye out on that one. Velocio always loves to have their kind of more advanced projects that they support, and White Wolf is definitely one of those advanced freestyle trails, or not free riding, I guess I could say. More ability than I have to ride that, but it's really awesome, and you should definitely check out what they have going on at UVMBA. That one should probably be done mid-season at the latest, and there is already some completion up there for that. And then longtime supporters, VBT Vacations is supporting a new trail or new climbing trail at Saxon Hill, which is going to do reworking pretty much the entire upper section of Saxon Hill. So that's really going to bring a totally different experience. And then there's also going to be some awesome things. So that project's going to be definitely this year and next. And we appreciate VBT to kind of help push that along. Definitely Saxon Hill is going to be very busy very shortly once the snow stops. MotorX, thank you to MotorX because they've sponsored us for the last few years by just giving us stuff, and they were able to actually support us monetarily, and they wanted to help with adaptive riding and the businesses down in Connecticut. So Stratton Rec was a logical fit for them because it's right in kind of their backyard. And then thank you to MTBVT / Green Mountain Showdown for supporting Wamba's winter grooming operations, which already went into place basically this year. So if you got the chance to go ride down in Woodstock and ride some fat biking, you already got to see some of this money in action. And again, this is the second year that we've had a naming grant come out of the Green Mountain Showdown. So thank you very much to Ryan and that crew over there for that. And we're already starting conversations for next year. I'm going to be passing it off to Bern, who's going to talk about trail grants that came from the VMBA office.
Hi, I am Bern Brody. I'm from Richmond, Vermont, and I sit on the board of Richmond Mountain Trails as well as on the board of VMBA. I'm one of 2 chapter reps on VMBA's board. The chapter reps are a direct connection between the chapters and the board of VMBA and the organization. We try and stay in close touch with the chapters and listen to feedback, hear what people's needs are, etc. We also get to work with chapter leads on trail grants. As Nick mentioned, in 2024, VMBA awarded $91,555 in grants to chapters. So that included trail grants, the naming grants that Joe just talked about, flood recovery money, and money from the partnership with KBF for adaptive grants. It was pretty cool this year that we were able, or in 2024, that we were able to award $52,550 to chapters throughout the state through VMBA Trail grants. They're listed here. The grants went to chapters throughout the state of Vermont, grants from $1,800 to $7,000. And those grants paid for everything from organizational strategic planning to climate resiliency work to new trails and trail upgrades and repairs. The grants are awarded directly by VMBA. They're awarded by a committee of chapter leadership. So VMBA has 28 chapters, and the leaders of those chapters are all invited to participate in this committee that reviews grants from chapters and then spends a bunch of time thinking about the grants, asking questions, sorting through them, and figuring out how to best divide the money that we have in order to meet the needs of the chapters. It's a labor of love, and I'm incredibly appreciative for all of the chapter leads that spend their time reading those grants and then rolling up their sleeves and discussing how to award the funds. The number I wish we had is the total revenue that chapters in Vermont were able to raise, because for every trail grant that VMBA awards, like, this is usually just a small piece of what that chapter is seeking. It can often be the first piece of funding that a chapter needs, but many times it kind of closes the gap for a chapter. So that means that those chapters are applying for other funds. We always expect chapters to have, we call it like a little bit of skin in the game. And we have heard repeatedly from chapters that by participating in this twice a year or 3 times a year VMBA Trail Grant Review, that it's helped them do better raising money from other sources. So not only does the VMBA Trail Grant process actually put money in the hands of the chapters, but it has also helped chapters learn how to write grant proposals better and how to make a case for their projects beyond the borders of Vermont, bringing more money into Vermont, more trails, better trails, and just more stoke around riding. So that's about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Bern. Awesome. So Bern noted some of the additional programs I'll just quickly touch on before we hand it over to chapters to talk about some of those projects. We did fund 4 adaptive upgrade grants through generous support from the Kelly Brush Foundation. So that involved support for upgrades to a section of the Belmont project down that SOAP is working on at the Crosstown Trail System, support to finish fellowships upgrades across their networks in Chittenden County, and an extension to the Cricket Hill network to Megan's Back 40 Trail, which will extend the adaptive miles there. So really exciting to be able to award that funding and help our chapters make their trail systems more accessible. And then the last bucket of grants that we awarded in the past year were Major Storm Recovery Fund grants. So these are internal funds that we use, the Major Storm Recovery Fund, that we've sort of built up this reserve over the past couple of years. We used a fair amount of it last year with the 2023 flooding. We again saw flooding this past summer, a much shorter duration but intense round of storms that we were able to provide funding to Fellowship of the Wheel and to Millstone to address issues from that flood. And then we actually had some other unrelated to the summer flooding this past year, but VMBA had winter storm damage that the fund was able to be deployed to help clean up, and then some lingering damage down at Blueberry Lake. Mad River Riders got a small fund to replace a bridge there from damage occurred in the summer of 2023. So it's really awesome to have this fund and the framework that the trail grant provides, but then the funding available for chapters to really quickly get their networks back in action after a storm or damage. And then this is in addition to over $50,000 of funding that we were able to secure through the state, through the VORAC Community Grant Program for flood recovery assistance that was dispersed this past year to make repairs from the 2023 flood. So a lot of funding went to really to bring our networks back online and also make them more climate resilient in the future. So with that, we kind of touched on a lot of these trails, but we're going to hear from a whole bunch of chapters. Again, this is my favorite part of the evening. But to talk about naming grants and trail grants that were completed this past year. So I won't walk through each of them, but you're going to hear from Fellowship of the Wheel, Richmond Mountain Trails, Upper Valley Mountain Bike Association, the Velemont, WADA, Mamba, Addison County Bike Club, BATS, BRMBC, Jamba, Last, Millstone, Ripon, and then SOAT are all going to walk through grants that they completed, at least in part, thanks to trail and our naming and trail grant funding this past year. So without further ado, and one more thing I'll note, so with a little bit of ado, but these represented $137,000 in funding from the naming and trail grant program. So significant investment in our trails and exciting to hear about the work that's been accomplished. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Adam with Fellowship of the Wheel.
Thank you, Nick. Great job on the tongue twister, rattling off all the chapter names. I think we should incorporate that into the next staff gathering as a little fun activity. Hello, everyone. My name is Adam. I'm the director with Fellowship of the Wheel. Here to talk about our naming grant, which was sponsored by Fuse Marketing. So a little bit of history. This was in Bombardier Park in Milton. For many, many years, Fellowship of the Wheels looked throughout Chittenden County where there are, areas devoid of trail or lacking, mountain bike infrastructure. Part of our mission is to have everyone in Chittenden County, live and recreate here. So Milton had a project in the works for many, many years. It was started by some volunteers, and then in 2022 and 2023, Fellowship got involved with those volunteers and Parks and Recreation staff to help build and develop a 2-mile MTB loop. So some of that trail was built by volunteers, some of it was designed and built by Fellowship, and some of it was designed and built by another volunteer with a machine. So it's kind of like a mix of different inputs, and you get different feel throughout that primary MTB loop in the Bombardier Park. Phase 2 was introduced during 2023, and thanks to this Fuse marketing grant, really kind of like secured funding for our staff to work with more volunteers to get another section of trail in. This Phase 2, which you can see on the map there, is sort of the south end of the park, connects to another neighborhood. And some of the volunteers even discovered some old BMX jumps on the town parcel that the town was really like in favor of restoring back into a skills area. So we performed Fellowship of the Wheel Trail Crew 180 total hours in 2024 with the help of this grant, and we had almost just as many volunteer hours to put in a total of 0.75 miles of trail. There will be a grand opening celebration, and it's planned for August of 2025, just tidying up signage and sort of finishing touches on the trails. But check them out on Trail Forks. They're open, free to use, and there'll be a grand opening sometime in August paired with one of their music in the park events on I believe a Tuesday night. So thanks again to Fuse Marketing for helping support this project and getting it pushed to the finish line. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Merrick from RMT, who will be talking for many minutes more than me with all the grants that they had for the driving range.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Merrick Gillies. I live in Bolton, and I'm one of the board members for Richmond Mountain Trails. And here to talk about a couple of trail and naming grants that we received for the driving range. First one that I want to start with here was we received a trail grant in 2023 to assist with the construction of the parking area for the network. This was really critical for us as there's a lot of, as a Bolton resident, we have a lot of recreation in this town and not a lot of parking. So we really wanted to make sure we could provide suitable parking and also parking away from the other land use on the property, which is a pretty major sugaring operation. So for folks over in there, you'll notice that you park and then you ride through the fields through the solar array before entering the trail network, and that's really to keep the users separated from the other operations. Parking lot was a little bit challenged and pretty expensive for a number of reasons, and we're really fortunate to receive support from VMBA and a bunch of other organizations, which I'll get into in a second. But some of the more exciting things that we got to work through was this area is in the floodplain, and so we could not do any fill, which made it a little bit of a drainage challenge. So there was a lot of stone brought in, and I'm pleased to report it survived 2 flood events in the last 2 years where it's been inundated. And there were a couple tree casualties, but generally infrastructure is all there. And then also we had to pave shoulder access to Route 2 because of it being part of the VTrans right away. Overall, though, it's been really in great shape and sees a lot of use. And part of that use is that this parking lot also now serves as a trailhead for the Catamount Trail. Catamount Trail runs through this property on its way up to Bolton. So folks have been using that in the winter. Catamount's been plowing. We had some fat biking out there as well this winter. And that's been great. And then also Crag, Vermont, they have some boulders. There's folks up in the woods with crash pads using that resource as well. And then, generally other community members use this as well. We actually lost one of our main parking areas due to flood events in town. This is really, really great community resource as well for folks who are just looking to double up in cars. And yeah, really want to thank VMBA for the support. And it was really great to sort of see this come as a sort of joint project between a lot of organizations and, really provide a great resource for the town that really struggles with, providing places for people to put their cars when they go recreate in the hills. We can go to the next slide, Nick. Next project. This is a naming grant we received from the Royal Group. So just wanted to thank the Royal Group. And we sort of had completed a first phase of the network. There was a sort of trail all the way from the top to the bottom. And we were looking sort of at the sort of phase 1B, I'll call it, which was sort of the rest of the trails to sort of flesh out what we sort of determined was sort of phase 1 of what we were looking to build on the parcel. We really wanted to have a trail that really highlighted the unique topography. There's really cool woods in this area, a lot of boulders, a lot of really beautiful trees, mossy rock slab. You can see one of our board members, Thomas. There's a few pictures at the bottom. Actually, that one might be Adam on the left. Anyways, to highlight that, we had identified a pretty challenging corridor and really wanted to work with a builder to sort of, take that corridor, highlight it, the natural beauty, and then also produce a trail that would be fairly technical, but still meet one of the primary major goals of the network was that every single trail would be adaptive ready at the onset of construction. It was a resounding success. We worked with Lepesker and Daughters on this trail. It's really become a favorite of riders in the area. There's a lot of really unique rock work. There's a lot of really great turns and berms, and it's a pretty fast way down from the summit before you have to regain your elevation. I would encourage folks who are riding this. It's easy to get caught in the flow of it, but if you are out there and you want to take a look, just stop and look up and down the slope, and you'll sort of, for me, it always blows my mind that we were able to sort of put a trail through this corridor. It's a really steep chunk of land, and the trail's been holding up really well. We can go to the next slide. Final one I want to talk about for the driving range. Received a trail grant from VMBA for assistance with the construction of heavy duty, which is an intermediate descending option on the lower half of the network. We started this project with volunteers and worked on it for over a summer and made a little bit of good headway at the top and quickly realized we were not going to be able to complete this all the way to the bottom at the current pace of progress, and also due to the fact that the building terrain slowly was getting more challenging as we got lower. So we wanted to make sure this was finished right and finished in a way that would last a long time. So this was a trail that we also worked with Lepesker and Daughters on and contracted at the same time as the double bogey trail that we just talked about. But really a very different flavor and character to this one. And really was important for us to sort of fulfill the goals of the network, and really provide sort of different descending experiences for a variety of users who are sort of out using the network. It's a really great trail. We want to thank VMBA's support. There's a lot of fundraising efforts, a lot of community fundraising efforts that went into this trail, and the other trails as well. And it really came out well, and it's been a great trail for folks to enjoy, and takes you right back down towards the parking lot. I did sort of want to finish on a note here. I sort of have a little bit of a slide on the right here, but we really want to thank VMBA. We realize there's been a lot of grants sort of dedicated towards this project, but just sort of want to highlight as well that this was a really large fundraising effort for our organization. We fundraised about $270,000 for the development of this parking lot and trail network. So, as Bern sort of alluded to, these grants are really critical for us in closing gaps or being used as match for other funding opportunities, to really, take that project and break it down into chunks that we're able to execute on. So I just wanted to give thanks to VMBA, and then just sort of highlight, the overall scale and scope of this project. We're looking to do a little bit more work this summer, to sort of improve some of the trails that were built first and suffered the heaviest damage during the flooding events. And then really we'll consider that sort of the phase one, and work from there and sort of continue on. It's been really excellent. I drive by this on my way to work, on my way home, and all summer long, we built pretty much the biggest parking lot we could afford, and it's full. It gets a lot of use. It's really been great to see folks enjoying this, as there's a lot of folks who live in the area. So it's been seeing a lot of riders. Go to the next slide. So changing roles here a little bit. So as well as being a board member for Richmond Mountain Trails, I'm also staff at Vermont Huts. I am a project manager. I work on primarily the Velmont Trail for my day-to-day work, and wanted to sort of talk about one project here that we received naming and trail grant for, that we worked on this past summer at the Somerset Reservoir. So Somerset Reservoir, south of Stratton, north of Mount Snow, beautiful spot. Currently doesn't have any bike trail, but is part of our planned alignment from Massachusetts sort of up along this area. But the trail we were working on currently serves as the Catamount Trail. And we were looking to do this work to improve the user experience for Catamount Trail users. And then once we're finished with other trails in the area, we plan to adopt this as part of the Velomont. So there's a great sort of collaboration between those organizations that VMBA was able to support. And there's sort of a couple of interesting portions of this project. So this work site's really remote. Great River Hydro owns the land. It abuts Green Mountain National Forest. There's very, very challenging access to get out here due to the reservoir and due to the topography. There's essentially no access to the east of this parcel, and the Catamount Trail is located on the east side of the reservoir. So the sort of two main goals of this project was to, one, install a new 30-foot length bridge over the Blueberry Swamp drainage, which is what you can see in the lower left-hand corner there. That for cyclists in the future, or folks using the trail for summer use, you may be getting your feet wet. If the flow is low, if the flow is high, you're definitely getting your feet wet. It's a really was kind of a hazard for Catamount Trail users stepping down. That was flowing all winter, so definitely needed a bridge, get folks out of that drainage. And then also get that bridge above where we're expecting this to sort of come up during spring flows or flood events. So a fairly long bridge, about as big as we could do, with timbers that we worked with the Trail Fixing Collective to install. Sort of a fun highlight on that was that we were tasked, the volunteers and I worked to get the lumber out on site to save the contractor having to haul it through the woods. And the solution was we're able to rent a pontoon boat from a supplier, outfitter in Wilmington. They came up and we were able to pilot the boat across the reservoir with all the lumber. The gentleman operating the boat was very generous and definitely exceeding the weight capacity of the craft. And we almost fried the engine, but we were able to get all the lumber to the other side and stage it for Sam, who was able to construct the bridge. And then the other aspect of this project was working with the Trail Fixing Collective. They did a bunch of rock armoring work. Really impressive work. They were camping out there for 2 weeks. They just spent 2 weeks in the woods and used a bunch of grip hoists and lifted a bunch of rocks. And there's a picture of one of their sections, but they did about 30 sections that look just like that. Really, really great to work with them. So yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Austin next with Upper Valley Mountain Bike Association. And thanks for listening to me ramble for a bit.
Thanks, Merrick. Appreciate it. I'm Austin Fula, chairperson of Upper Valley Mountain Bike Associations, the one chapter that kind of spans the border between New Hampshire and Vermont. So this project is actually right over the border on the New Hampshire side. So we got $2,500 from Mountain Bike VT to support the construction of an intermediate flow trail. If anyone knows Landmark, better known as Boston Lot, it's basically just a pile of roots and rocks. So we decided to, get our first machine built project out there. So off the top of Crafts, which is kind of the most open, kind of least rocky, least roady section of the network. So yeah, we just finished this up fall last year, and it's riding great. And as you can see from the picture, it actually is a beautiful berm. It might be our really only proper berm in the whole network. So yeah, it's a blast. It feels like riding in Woodstock for 90 seconds until you're transported back into kind of some more old school technical riding. So yeah, I think, that was the main things we wanted to cover. Give Nick a little bit of time back and pass it off to Alex with Waterbury Area Trail Alliance.
Hi, everybody. Nick, I think we're ready for next slide. Alex Showerman here, Trails Director for Waterbury Area Trails Alliance. So we were fortunate to receive the Darn Tough naming grant, which we used to help fund an $18,500 refresh of Hill Farmer and Highbridge with LD Trailworks. It was a mix of hand and machine work with two main focuses, really to bring some life back into all the lovely berms, doubles, rollers, tabletops, really just make the trail feel as more lively again. And then, of course, a focus on drainage and sustainability, improving a few problem areas, clearing out and just making the drains more robust. We had a FEMA declared natural disaster here in this part of the state this past year. And Little River, these trails were actually only closed one day. And it was the day of the storm, and then a quick assessment, and they held up really well. So I think a big testament to L&D for their incredible work, getting this trail super dialed from a drainage wise. And we're really appreciative of the support of VMBA and Darn Tough on this project. And I am throwing it to, I believe, Mark at Wamba.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. All right, so Wamba and Austin, thank you for the shout out on our dirt. We appreciate the the love. Wamba received a Velocio naming grant, a 2024 grant. We got the work done last summer. Schist Creek is on Mount Peg is our most technical trail. It's about a mile long, downhill enduro style, and we've hosted 2 years. We've hosted segments of the Eastern States Cup on this trail. It's not for everyone, but for those who are looking for technical and challenging, it is for you. But it had become really after the second year's race, pretty washed out, and it was to the point of technical is fun or is a challenge, but unsafe is another thing. And so putting in some catch berms and things like that, Gavin and Graham, all handwork they did, put it back in, improve the climb, and make the experience really what it was intended to be. And this trail is only about 3 or 4 years old in total, and so we were really able to see the usage pattern and clean it up and make what we think is a really durable and resilient trail that will hold up for the future. So thank you to Velocio for doing that. And the next slide we've got, the Mount Peg North End rehabilitation. So this was a trails grant in 2024, and this was a big one. On Mount Peg on the north end, These were our legacy trails. They were kind of all there, hand built. There is the best way I could describe them previously. And basically, what we did was we created loops. What we needed, our end goal was to create more trails for beginner and intermediate riders, and also for adaptive riding. And we're excited to bring in the Kelly Brush Foundation for our adaptive assessment this spring on this work. And so really this is a couple of it's almost like a figure eight now of kind of double wide bermy flowy loops. And it's for everyone. It's just fun. It doesn't mean, we all know adaptive doesn't mean easy. It just means adaptive. And we think we're that, we'll get that certification, but these were great. And because they were nice, wide, well-built trails, we were able to, thanks to our winter naming grant, we were able to acquire a grooming sled this winter and open up for the first time to public access winter riding on Mount Peg. We had nearly 2,000 through our trail climbers. We had about 2,000, kind of bikes and users cross through. And so it was a great investment. These trails are awesome. They're a highlight instead of an afterthought. And we're really appreciative of the grant. And that's it for Wamba. And I get to turn it to Dayton from Mamba.
What's up, Vimba fam? Hope everybody can hear me okay. Let's see. So we're here to talk about something we got as part of a trail grant. Pretty excited about this one. This is our Hubbard Park multi-use trail. And I think this is like a really great one for everybody in Vimba to point out that this is something where our mountain bike advocacy organization is directly supporting trails for everybody. So this is a great example of a multi-use trail connecting all the way across Hubbard Park from one neighborhood on the west side that never had really good direct access all the way over to the trails at North Branch. So it's going to be a great design, and we've just finished up with some initial construction pieces that this grant was a key part of funding. So thanks, Vimba. Thanks, everybody. And is it riding season yet? That's all I got to say. But I think after that, I'll just hand it over to John at the Addison County Club.
Hey, I am here. This is John Kiddo with ACBC. I'm in a comically bad situation to be presenting right now, driving in Concord, New Hampshire. I am not actually driving, my partner is. But I led a strategic planning process for ACBC, and they asked me to speak about it. It's a little bit of a different type of grant that we received. So ACBC has been around for a while. It's been through some ups and downs for sure. And the main thing I did was I led a Back to the Future protocol. So we really looked at what ACBC wanted to be in the future, like looking 3 to 4 years out, and created a plan to achieve that. It's a little bit different from starting from where you're at and projecting forward. We kind of envisioned what we wanted and moved forward. One thing that I'll say that was most unique was the partner outreach. So we identified who have been our partners in the past, current, and future. We did a nice job with that. It was really successful to learn about how people thought of ACBC. There was a lot more respect for the club than maybe we had anticipated. The slide here shows the vision, mission, roles and responsibilities, member engagement and growth, and trail stewardship were our primary focus areas. A couple outcomes were, in addition to revamping our values, vision, and mission, we increased communication with the members. That was an area that was really present before. We didn't really think that was possible. And through that partner reach, we realized that it was. And it was something that was desired from local riders because only a select few really knew how to navigate it. I think I'll hand off to Jared. One quick save the date is Nick, you mentioned the Silver Moose Trail, and I don't know if this has been publicized at all, but we are planning an opening event for that trail on June 8th, which is a Sunday. And so we're planning to get those things opened, not just Silver Maple, but not just Silver Moose, but all the trails in that area. The Moose Lamu area is really, really special. It's a huge asset to Vermont that doesn't get ridden enough, actually. So with that, I'll pass it to Jared at Bats. Thanks so much.
Hey, everybody. Jared checking in from Bennington, down in the banana belt of Vermont. And you know what? I think it is riding season down here. So just a heads up. So one of the grants I want to go over here is our kiosk and wayfinding 2023 grant that really addressed a lot of the wayfinding issues that we have in our network. We're a pretty dense network on the flanks of Mount Anthony, and really needed some wayfinding signs out there throughout the network. This also funded a kiosk for a future parking area. As many of you know, Southern Vermont College folded maybe 7 years ago. A lot of our trails are on that parcel, and it's going through some transformation here in terms of, it's going to be a high-end resort, but thankfully our trail system is going to be kept intact. We're going to have a nice kiosk down at the below the existing parking area, and yeah, it's going to be nice. Should be a good little parking and venture point. And this was also funded through VMBA grant, as well as MSK engineers here in town. You can kick it over to the next slide. We also had a trail grant from the Northern Forests Center under the USDA. And this was really to address a lot of erosion and water control issues that sort of the lower, more heavily trafficked area of our network has experienced. And it was really the first time that a mini excavator was put on our trail system. We threw in a few bridges, a couple on Grimes Grind and Halloween Tree, brought in some nice crushed stone for sort of the more pedestrian used area of the network. A lot of dog walkers kind of need something a little bit wider. And installed some culverts, and it was really great. We got to partner with our local tech school, Southwest Tech, with their forestry program, and brought in some students to help with the machine work and installing of culverts. And I will kick it over to Greg with Brewster River. Thank you.
Hey everybody, Greg here, calling in from Jeffersonville. So this project, it really started off with an active BRMBC member, Deborah Town. She passed away in 2021, and friends and family asked the club to start a Deborah Town Memorial Fund and use that money for a worthwhile bike-related project. And so we started talks with Underhill Central Schools personnel, which helped lead us in the direction of a multi-phase project, with phase one being a user-friendly, multi-use, all-season, ADA compliant, gravel surfaced rec path around the perimeter of all the fields and playground at the elementary school and the property. We're happy to say that phase one is completed, which is this rec path, this multi-use rec path. Phase two is going to be, proper, entry-level mountain biking trails into the woods just adjacent to the school, so that kids can start on this rec path and then cut off into the woods and do some real trails, a little bit more technical. We can go to the next slide. So it was a really big effort. We pulled together over 39, almost $40,000 in funding from grants and donations. And then we got another huge amount of in-kind donation from Kingsbury Construction Company and FW Whitcomb Construction in the form of gravel and trucking and labor and equipment. But the trail really, it turned out great. I mean, it's used every day by all sorts of people. People cross-country ski on it. Kids are out there every day biking on it, running on it. People walk the dogs on it. We have the school is in charge of maintaining, doing the weed whacking and mowing around it to make sure that it stays in good shape and well used. So we're really proud and really happy with this trail. We have a nice kiosk there as well, and you can just see the pictures, even though you have to tilt your head to see one of them. They're really getting it's getting a ton of use, and we're really excited to start the next phase of the project, refurbishing some, and building new trails in the woods just adjacent to the school. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jason with Jamba.
Awesome. Thanks, Craig. How's everybody doing? My name's Jason Rickles. I'm down in Jamaica, Vermont with Jamaica Area Mountain Bike Alliance. And we have both the completion of a 2023 trail grant to talk about, as well as a second trail grant we received last year. But we'll start with the completion of our first trail network, our first parcel of trail at all. That again, we were awarded the grant in 2023 and we're granted an extension to continue the work into 2024. And we had the pleasure of cutting the ribbon on hardcore, core spelled CORPS, referring to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who we have a land partnership agreement with, and they've become fantastic partners of Jamba. And to my knowledge, the first land access agreement in Vermont between VMBA and the federal government on federal government land. So pretty exciting stuff. And again, they've continued to be wonderful partners. As you can see from the map, it's a continuation of having a ball. Again, the location is Ball Mountain, which is the top half mile of now a 1 mile Vermont downhill, meaning a pedally downhill / two-way trail. Makes for a great climb as well. We do brag that we have the best trailhead in the state of Vermont, at least the most scenic, down on Ball Mountain Lake, looking up at the mountains and the dam itself. And it's a huge step for a nascent VMBA chapter to start to get a toehold in the region. This trail is bisected by the West River Trail, which is a major artery running up the West River Valley all the way to South Londonderry. So this is pretty exciting, as it's really kind of the first major footprint for mountain bike trail in this region, in this immediate region. Next slide, please. And last year, we were the recipient of a full VMBA trail grant to complete construction alongside Sinuosity and Brooke and his gang of a skills loop trail here at the Jamaica Village School, which is a pretty big deal because it falls under the category of Vermont schools in trouble as far as population quickly diminishing in our local school population, and our local SU strongly considering consolidation. That said, the local SU has been a great partner in signing a landowner agreement and encouraging us to make best use of the land for community benefit as we can. Again, Brooke and Sinuosity helped us build a really neat entry-level skills trail as phase one, while also designing out a bunch of components for phase two, things like a strider track, a couple of jump lines, and some wood feature mazes. So pretty exciting stuff right in town, pretty much halfway between the village and Jamaica State Park. So a great community gathering spot, great asset to the park itself, and a great resource, particularly for kids, but for all age riders right here in the village. Pretty cool. And one last thing I'll mention before I hand it off, again on the previous slide, both having a ball and hardcore up at Ball Mountain Dam were built by Sustainable Trail Works. So Hardy and Catron, huge friends of ours, and they've done an incredible job with their crew on what is a completely hand-built trail. So if you haven't been down here, you got to check that out. It's an incredibly beautiful trail and super creative way to use the terrain. And then here in town, we're the beneficiaries of Brooke and Sinuosity and their creative genius. So it's been a great year for Jamba with enormous financial assistance from VMBA. And with that, I will pass the ball to a Southern Vermont neighbor of ours, Ludlow Area Sport Trails. And Tim, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Good evening, everyone. Tim Calabrese here from Ludlow Area Sport Trails. We received a trail grant this year to do the extension for the Back 40 Trails, which is located in the village of Ludlow, and it's on town property. And just to give you a little background, we're a pretty new organization. We started in 2022. And the first trails that were built was a downhill and a skills loop up top. And what this grant helped us do was to extend our uphill trail to phase 2 and 3 to kind of more of a level area. And it was a combination of hand-built and professionally built trails from Sinuosity. They did a fantastic job. Our volunteer efforts were pretty monumental. We had the opportunity to have donated 2 mini excavators, and we constructed the uphill portion up to the phase 2 and 3. That was done in June and July. And we've had some pretty good success with volunteers helping, and it's getting quite a bit of use. And the nice thing about it, as I said, it's located in the village, and it's adjacent to the local elementary school, as well as other community centers. And we're hoping to get a adaptive assessment done this year for the uphill so that we can have some of these trails open to all users. Things left to do, we just have to do some wayfinding signage, and build a kiosk, which is going to happen this summer. And this also dovetails with our 5-year strategic plan. Next, we're going to build trails on Fletcher Farm. We received Act 250 approval, and we just found out today that we received a RTP grant to get us going. So we're pretty excited. And eventually we want to connect the village of Proctorsville. And that is it. So with that, I will pass it along to Chris with Millstone Trail Associates. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I'm Chris. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm here with Millstone Trails. I'm the vice president of the trail system here in Barre, Vermont. And we are excited to talk about the trail grant we got from VMBA 2023 for the $2,305 for some updated signage, which was a really needed project for us. One of the number one pieces of feedback we would get from trail users was that it was quite easy to get lost at Millstone, as a combination of not enough signage and signage being lost to time and vandalism and theft. People, surprisingly, even as boring as these original signs were, would take them. So we were able to, with this grant, get brand new signage, as you can see there. The new ones with our good little gnome friend on there. Beth Mueller, who sits on our board and is a local artist, she designed the trail signs, and we got 131 of them plus, and that's just the little signs for the trail itself, but we also got all these map signs, so we got a bunch of those that we scattered throughout the forest now. If you're not familiar, we're kind of spread across 3 different sections. One of them is the town forest in Barre Town, and then 2 other private sections on Rock of Ages land. So it's a little disjointed, and these signs help kind of help you find where you're at among the system. So even the sign that is shown here is mostly just the town forest section, but we also have 2 sections for the private land too. So this was a super exciting project for us, and the feedback so far has been really good. Around the same time, we started a summer trail series, and along with that, got a lot of feedback from people that it was much easier to find their way around the trails. So we have more coming. like it says here, we experienced logging. We've really had some logging throughout the 3 sections over the last 4 years. And that last part in the fellowship side on one of the private lands just wrapped up last year. So we will continue the sign project over there, and that will really cover the whole trail system. And that's all I've got from us. I'm going to pass it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Sarah with Riders in Plainfield and Marshfield in the northeast part of the state. We were the recipients of, I believe, a 2023 trail grant, and put that to use at our local school. We've been building trails there since 2018. They've been a really amazing partner to work with. They have about 80 acres and an existing trail system, and they've welcomed new purpose-built mountain bike trails and also allowed us to go in and add a lot of cool features to some of the existing trails and spruce them up so that they're just more fun for the kids on bikes. The school's been so supportive with bringing in the Berry Tech Center to build a bike shed and to refurb some old bikes. And we now have a system at the school where kids experience zero barriers to getting on the trails on a bike. There's bikes, helmets, gear, trails right out the door. Our community in Marshfield did with a grant, a recreation asset kind of mapping and planning project a few years ago, and we realized as a community that we had a lot of great recreational assets like the school, but that nobody knew where they were. And so, in line with that, our partners at the school and RIPM, we decided, why don't we map the trail system, put up signage, add kiosks, start to bring in the information that people need so that they can come out and enjoy the trails. So with this trail grant, we worked with Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission and the students and staff to map the entire trail system. We collected data out in the field, and then CVRPC put it into a beautiful map that you can see there on the screen. And then I worked with a great company in New Hampshire to print our trail signs, which are going up with kid help in the spring of this year. And we installed a few kiosks, and we've added some trail maps similar to Millstone, some trail maps that will be out on the trail system, and just some general informational signs so that people can navigate the trails. And we also, in addition to this funding in the same year, brought in some funding from Northern Forest Center. And we were able to do a few community nights. The school actually has its own wood-fired pizza oven. So we would do guided hikes and bike rides and have some pizza together, play long games, and did a few trail work days with the kids as well. They're begging for more trail work, which is so cool. So there's one picture of our kiosk there. I rather wanted to include some pictures of kids building trails. We have a really great mentor style program that gets families and kids out together. So yeah, hopefully more good stuff to come. And thank you so much, VMBA, for the support. With that, I hand it off to Steve with Southern Vermont Trails Association.
Thanks, Sarah. I think this was 2023, we were working on the access trail, which is called Blue Brook Boogie, which gets you from the parking lot over to the already built Sweet Tooth. We had planned on a 4-week timeline, it being about 3/4 of a mile of trail. There was to be 2 bridges and 150-foot boardwalk. What we ended up having, this was unlike what we had last season where it was really dry. This was one of the raziest seasons we had on record. So we ended up with about 3 weeks of machine time over a total of 6 weeks due to the levels of the water table. Ended up being about 1 mile of trail. We were able to do 3 smaller bridges and a bunch of other rock work because boardwalks don't tend to last that long. So we wanted to reduce the amount of maintenance that we had. While we were in there, we also expanded the parking lot by 15 feet. And the creation of this trail kind of took some pressure off where the existing right of way went by adjacent landowners. Nick, if you could go to the next slide. And then last year, we were doing a bunch of water mitigation on Crosstown Trail, which is the class 4 town legal trail that runs through the center of the trails at Crosstown. Uh, been neglected for many, many years. Most of the drainage on the property was filled in. In big rain events, it would flow onto the trails. So we spent 2 weeks doing close to 3 miles of ditch work. We brought in about 50 yards of ditching stone for a couple of sections. We, on the south side of the property, installed 22 intersection signs with their corresponding posts, put in 4 nice Flintstone benches, and the sections that we regraded last season will be resurfacing with Vale, our partner, this summer. And then I would like to hand it off to Cheryl.
Thank you. And just major kudos and thank yous to all our chapters and volunteers for this phenomenal trail work. Really awesome. My name is Cheryl Brodowski, and I'm the incoming chairperson of the VMBA Board of Directors. First off, I'd just like to acknowledge quickly Tim Meyer, who will be wrapping up his board service with us. During his time on the board, Tim was instrumental in advancing our ambassador program, and he served as board vice chair. So thank you to Tim for your years of service. Next, in accordance with our VMBA bylaws, we recently proposed a slate of board recommendations to our membership for voting. The voting was open for the past 2 weeks to re-elect 2 directors to a second term, and then to also elect 1 of 3 candidates for an open board seat. Next slide. And I'm pleased to share that Quinn and Tara have been overwhelmingly re-elected to their director positions on the board. So congratulations to Quinn and Tara. And then I'm also thrilled to announce that Steve Latendre received just over 60% of the vote to be elected to his first year or his first 3-year term on the VMBA Board of Directors. So huge welcome to Steve, and thank you to all of our candidates. I will pass it over to Steve now, actually, for a quick hello and introduction.
Great. Well, thank you, Cheryl. Yeah, and very excited. I really just first want to thank the membership and the support. I am really passionate about mountain biking and really drawn to VMBA's vision. I see words like community and sustainability, and it's just really, really part of who I am. And so I'm really excited to take my skills and my interest and bring them to the VMBA board. Just as a bit of background, I live in Middletown Springs, Vermont, which is just east of Poultney. And Poultney is where the vast majority of Slate Valley trails are located. I'm just about 3.5 miles east of the Fairgrounds Trailhead, if you guys have had a chance to check out our trails. I've been on the board of SVT, our local chapter. This is my third 2-year term, so I'm heading into my 6th year on the board. I've served as the board treasurer for the past 4 years. In my first year on the board, I served as the secretary. I have quite a record of service in terms of working with nonprofits. Down here for years, I was on the board of SolarFest, which was a weekend music sustainable living fair. And for a number of years, I was on the board of Renewable Energy Vermont, which is our state renewable energy industry association, which I really linked to my kind of professional work in sustainable energy as an economist and a regulatory analyst. So when I joined SVT in 2019, that was the year that Green Mountain College closed in Poultney, Vermont, and I had been a professor there for many, many years. And I was looking around and wanting to contribute to the community. And the best thing that was happening in our community was Slate Valley Trails. And so I was really excited to join that group. It's really been extremely rewarding just to see the impact that recreation economies can have on these small rural Vermont communities. It's just really exciting to be in downtown Poultney on the weekend. You see all these cars from New York State and Massachusetts with bikes hanging out the back, and we really are, having an impact on our community. And that's really my interest is bringing that impact that we've seen tonight, all the incredible work that folks are doing across the state to really revitalize our economies, create healthy, sustainable communities. And I'm just super psyched to work with Nick and his team and also get to know the other board members. So thank you again for your support. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nick and look forward to seeing you guys out on the trails.
Thanks, Steve, and welcome. Delighted to have you on the board. So exciting to begin this next year with you and on the team here. So I'll spend just a couple minutes. We have about 15 minutes left, just talking about a couple of things we have coming down the pike this next season ahead. So on the trails front, we already have 15 projects funded through trail and naming grants for the year ahead, and we hope to fund additional ones. So we already are seeing, and we've noted some of the ones that have been funded through our naming and trail grant programs that Bern and Joe mentioned. So really excited to see those happening. We'll be doing a lot more with the BMP handbook that I talked about earlier and really disseminating that. We have planned 12 adaptive assessments across the state that's funded in part through the Trail Accessibility Hub, and really excited to continue to grow that program with Vermont Adaptive and the Kelly Brush Foundation. So we'll be all summer conducting those assessments. The Belmont, which Merrick both talked about a little bit, but we really, knowing that we have 100+ miles of Belmont Trail queued up for construction and design is really exciting to see that project taking off. It is really neat. One other thing happening this year, which is cool, is that we've actually secured an intern this summer to work with us in developing an internal trail database to help us better track really the needs and status of trails across the state. We often end up looking at trail forks or other sort of systems to better understand, to do research and understand things like what's happening with our trails, but when we need to track things like landowner access or climate vulnerability. So that's a project that'll be taking part this summer through an intern, which we're excited to share the results most likely the next annual meeting. And then one thing we'd love to do, we're working on ways we can grow the trail grant program. We've already awarded $60,000 in trail grants this year already, which Bern talked through. That's what we had budgeted. So we're working hard to secure additional funds to fund more projects this fall. So it's great to have that demand. They're fantastic projects that we funded, and that's a key priority for us over the next couple of months. On the advocacy front, I mentioned the recreation access recognition bills that are currently in the legislature. That's a huge priority. It's the second of our 2 advocacy goals. So there'll be a lot of work. You'll hear more about that this year. We're also excited to be part of a VORAC outdoor rec economic impact study that's going to be looking really at the community level. Steve just spoke a little bit about the impacts down in Poultney, and this effort is going to be funding work to really create economic impact toolkits for individual communities. So it's something I think our chapters really benefit from, in being able to communicate the value of outdoor recreation when applying for grants or doing planning, things like that. So more to come on that front. I mentioned the VTS system modernization. That's an exciting and important piece for our advocacy work. And then, as I briefly mentioned as well, we'll actually be at the International Trail Summit presenting both our best management practices work and our adaptive assessment program. So it's neat to be really recognized at the national and international level of the work that's going on here in Vermont. From a community standpoint, we're really excited to be working with Press Forward, the marketing firm, on a membership campaign that's designed to really take a bit of an outside-in look at how we can grow membership. So they're supporting it. They're working with us this spring to really revitalize and hopefully significantly grow that membership base, which Amy talked about had actually contracted last year. So something they're really prioritizing. A couple other things happening on the physical front. We have the third year of the Elevate Mountain Bike Festival, which is now in Stowe, June 6th through 8th. Super exciting to see it come to a VMBA chapter, and really super excited about the programming and the quality of that event growing. Something we think is really going to become an important keystone of our work to be more inclusive as a community here in Vermont and even greater New England. That's where we collaborate with NIMBA, with the New England Mountain Bike Association, and with Kingdom Trails to make that festival happen. Trail Accessibility Hub will be launching a public interface for users, adaptive users, and folks looking for accessible recreation experiences to better understand where they can do that. So exciting to see a public kind of version of that take place over the next couple of months. We'll also be investing more in our What a Rider Looks Like campaign, which is kind of stalled or haven't done too much on that front the past couple of years. So we have some funding, and we'll be working to kind of reboot that campaign. We also have a really exciting, Joe has been leading the charge on the member party, which is now called the Season Sender, which will be back. He'll talk about that in a minute, but it's been an amazing celebration the past 2 years, and we expect to see that grow. Really great chance to bring the community together towards the end of the season. And we'll also be really launching and doing a lot of work on that, what I described earlier, the Visitor's Guide to Mountain Biking in Vermont. So a bunch of stuff happening on the community front. And just quickly tying organization, we are still working, and we hope to have a marketing communications manager, our 4th key office staff manager, in place in the next month or 2 here. So it's been a long process, but that's a vital role that we're still working to fill. We will be onboarding. We have hired an adaptive assessment coordinator. So some of that Trail Accessibility Hub funding is allowing us to actually hire some additional capacity to really make sure that we can conduct 12 assessments in a way that provides chapters and trail managers useful information, helps them secure funding, that type of thing. So it's great to be able to invest some capacity in that with that grant funding. We also will, as already was noted earlier, that we have some board folks really driving that had this process on long-term fundraising planning. So how can we really significantly grow our fundraising capacity, which is vital to bring on extra staff and to be able to provide more funding to chapters. So a big effort over the next year we expect on that front. And another thing I'm hopeful that we can do is before the next annual meeting, the board get together and really review the strategic plan. We'll be at the midpoint. It'll be a great opportunity to kind of adjust and decide if and how we revise that plan to make sure it's as useful as possible. So a lot of stuff happening. We'll report on it for sure at the next annual meeting as well as throughout the season. And with that, though, I'm going to turn it over to Quinn to introduce our 2025 ambassadors.
Good evening, everybody. Just waiting for this next slide to pop up. Awesome. Hope you have all had an enjoyable evening learning about all things VMBA. Incredible organization. I'm certainly privileged to be a part of it. Happy to be leading the ambassador flock this summer. Several years ago, this is where I got my start with the organization and then fell down the slippery slope of becoming a board member and just entered my second term. So couldn't be happier. We've got 7 returning board member ambassadors and 5 newcomers. So Kate and Jody and Jeb and Holly and Gabe and Kim and Greg will be joining us again. They were doing outstanding work for us last summer. They will be joined this summer by Tyler and Nick and Matt and Christy and Andre, coming in with some new fresh energy. Nice wide variety of skill sets and bicycle interest types. So you're going to be seeing all sorts of great content from them all summer long. This crew is going to help us with blog posts. They're going to come to our events. They will really be our forward-facing look of VMBA. So don't be surprised if you see these folks out on trails. Certainly engage them in conversations if they haven't started that with you before you even open your mouth. Let's see here now. These guys, keep an eye out for their blog posts, their social takeovers, all that kind of stuff. And we're excited to have them on board. So anyhow, with that, I'm going to pass it on to Joe. Joe's got some cool stuff for you.
Well, hopefully we didn't lose Joe. If we did, I can sub in for. All right, well, I'm going to get going, Joe. You can hop in at any point if you're still live in action. So yeah, one thing I wanted to tee up quickly was the bike raffle. So this is going to launch in the next probably 2 weeks here. We're refining a few details, but really excited to be partnering with Forbidden and Hitchhiker. I trust me, this is a very cool bike that will be marketing coming down the line, but this is a critical fund. Oh, you're coming in, Joe?
Yeah, no, I had this whole thing about how excited I am about this, but I guess I was talking to myself.
Let me reshare. All right. Take it away.
I guess my headphone died. Yeah, I'm very excited for this one, if you know me. So yeah, stoked to have Forbidden Bikes and Hitchhiker working together. We thought this was going to be coming out a little bit later, but if you actually look on their website, they just released the bike that we will be working with. So that's super exciting. More details to come on that one. We will be working with Press Forward on this one, so I'm feeling pretty confident about it. And also, kind of on the back end, that's really awesome is that Forbidden this year is actually going to be working with us on some marketing assets and some events and stuff like that. So this will be the most support that we've gotten from a bike brand. So stay tuned to that. Go check out their site. They make fantastic bikes. But yeah, I can chew your ear off on that one. But we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so this year we have a lot of similar events this year, some different partners. So luckily, Lawson's this year has stepped up and is actually supporting all of our events this year. So to start, we are doing our VMBA Day series again. So we will be going to Burke Mountain to kick it off and then doing Kingdom Trails the next day for a little trail ride. And then a really exciting one, which is also a new DH partner, member benefit partner, Thunder Mountain is part of our program now this year. So we'll be going down there and actually doing a trail ride the next day with NEMBA and the DRT trails down there. So that'll be kind of fun to collaborate with our friends down south on that. Then we'll be going to Bolton Valley, which is always a really awesome event. And they actually have some really cool stuff in the mix for this year for trails. Stratton will be a little bit later this year. They have some lift maintenance going, but excited about that in Killington. But basically, if you haven't ridden DH, feel free to come in. We can help you out, get settled on rentals. We have deals with most of the resorts, and we'll show you around if you do know how to ride DH and have a little après afterwards, and we have a great raffle. Nick alluded to this a little bit, but we have Elevate coming back. This will be hosted at Trap Family Lodge, but it will also be on Trap Trail and Stowe Trail Partnership Trails. So we're super excited about this. We're also going to be working with Kristen Motley. So we know it's going to be a well-oiled machine, and also have a sweet after party with Ranch Camp on Saturday night. So make sure to check that out. We will also again have Vermont Adaptive, Unlikely Rider, and Vermont Youth Cycling, and hopefully a few of our other community builders that will be attending some or all of the VMBA Day series, or will be coming to other events throughout. So make sure to check that out. And again, Season Sender, year 3 in Woodstock, and super excited about it. Basically, just going to be keep growing. We had a lot more going on last year, and we're definitely going to have a lot more going on this year. So stay tuned on that one, but expect beers and tacos, e-bikes, and a great time. And then next slide. And then last year, had a lot of conversations and have a lot of great partners that help support put on the events, help us keep the lights on at the office. Some of these brands also provided some naming grants. So thank you very much to all of these partners for making things happen, specifically Bellagio, Lintelac Foundation, Conine Family Foundation, Fiddlehead, Thule, Cabot, Mavic, H&I Adventures, and Upstate Elevator, BBCO, POC, RK Miles, and Lawson's. And then I'll just kind of stop listing them off because they're there. But a lot of these people are coming back next year, so we must have a good thing going. And really excited to welcome them all back. And we really appreciate their support last year. And very excited about the people we have in the works this year.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Cool. Well, we're coming to our close here, and we did have one question I want to get a chance to speak to, but I want to make sure to remind folks we're hitting the peak of membership season over the next month or two. We expect to sign up several thousand additional members. We're ahead of where we were last year, which is great. We're about 50% ahead of 2024 this time, so that's good. But we have a long way to go to hit our target and to grow again like we have in the past couple of years. So app or website, doesn't matter. They both work great. You can go to certain events to get your membership, just a plug to do that. So don't delay, and we'll get that in the mail. And then before I go to Q&A, just wanted to be a huge thank you to the staff, to Joe and Amy and Marina in terms of the work that they do and making this possible, and certainly to the board. You heard from a bunch of them tonight, but the organization here at the office, who really benefit tremendously from their effort, and they've helped us grow as an organization, and really the impact that you see is in large part to their help. So big thanks on that front. I did want to answer a question came in the chat. It was a good one about the fact that we've been working to hire a replacement for our marketing manager for a couple of months. We don't yet have a development director. That's in the strategic plan. Question about if we're under investing in staff or office operations. And just to speak briefly to that, I sit down with Curtis initially each year, try to build a budget. And that budget has to be based in reality about sort of expected revenue and how we can manage that sort of what we want to accomplish. And I think we've done a really good job of that. Last year, as Curtis noted, one of the challenges, we came well in under our membership target. That's a big revenue driver. And we managed to squeak by without posting a loss, particularly following the previous year where we posted a significant, I think $50,000 net loss. And that's not something as an organization we can do year over year and survive. So I think there's always a question of balancing investment in resources, which is great, but that investment has to come then with additional revenue and additional resources for the organization. So I think just highlighting some of the stuff we'll be working on this year, that big investment in a long-term fundraising plan is for the purpose of being able to invest more in staff and invest more in operations, do things like hire a development director and a trails director, which are two roles we want to have here at the office, and then also provide more funding for trail grants and other kind of support for our chapters. So I think we've done a pretty good job. It's something you always have to manage carefully to ensure that you're being responsible financially. And I think the board has been tremendously supportive in our efforts to do that. So just wanted to comment because it was certainly a good question. But with that, I don't think we have any other questions in the chat that I saw come across, and we're right at 8 o'clock. So I think I'll go ahead unless anyone wants to drop anything else right now, but I think I'll go ahead and adjourn us. And just again, thanks everyone for joining. It was an amazing year, exciting things coming ahead, and we couldn't do it without you. So, and big thanks to all the chapters who presented tonight. It's so cool to see your work and your project. So thank you, and have a great evening and a great writing season.
Thanks, Nick.
Great job, everyone.